Professor Namyong Lee's commentary, long, Samsung merged with Harman 10 years ago. If it now acquires Germany's ZF Brain, ADAS, via M&A, can it succeed? Fixing the definition of integration to the automotive industry's layered structure. The automotive industry is a layered industry composed of original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, and parts manufacturers, and the core mechanism of competitiveness is integration. Issues where manufacturers at the same level, or configuration items at the same level, interlock by expanding functions, products and scope are horizontal integration, while issues where manufacturers at higher and lower levels, or configuration items across higher and lower layers, interlock by ceiling interfaces and responsibility boundaries are vertical integration. Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, ADAS, are the representative domain where this definition applies most strictly. ADAS is composed of hardware configuration items, HWCI, and computer software configuration items, CSCI, and the CSCI is further decomposed into multiple software components that operate together. Standardization and interoperability issues among HWCIs at the same level are horizontal integration, while the ceiling of cross-layer connections, verification, and the chain of responsibility that descends through HWCI CSCI components is vertical integration. Therefore, Samsung Electronics' acquisition of Harman and ZF must not be framed as combining companies, but as a declaration that it will expand scope through horizontal integration and then seal responsibility through vertical integration. If that declaration remains only in documents and org charts and fails to descend into the product responsibility system, mergers and acquisitions, M&A, become a device that amplifies conflict rather than creating synergy. Harman may have been a financial success, yet a separate verdict exists at the platform level. Samsung Electronics' acquisition of Harman was a major deal, announced in 2016 and completed in 2017. And in the short term, it had the nature of horizontal integration aimed at securing an automotive electronics channel. Judged only by financial performance, Harman can be seen as having become a profit-generating business unit in that it has continued to contribute a certain level of revenue and operating profit within Samsung's consolidated results. However, true success in the automotive domain is not determined by the income statement alone. Automotive is a responsibility industry where safety, recalls, and warranties are coupled, and what OEMs evaluate when selecting suppliers is not a technology demo, but mass production trust and defect response history. The fact that Harman earned money and the fact that Samsung dominates the vehicle's brain layer are entirely different statements. The real question of the Harman acquisition is this: whether the infotainment-centered horizontal integration expanded into vertical integration toward ADAS and central computing, and whether in that process the evidence chain of functional safety and cybersecurity was sealed into Samsung's responsibility system. If one cannot answer yes to that question, the Harman acquisition remains strategically unfinished, even if it was financially successful. Technical integration is not speed, but completion of the safety evidence chain. The essence of technical integration in ADAS is not flashy algorithms, but the safety evidence chain. The International Organization for Standardization, ISO, Functional Safety Standard, ISO 26262, requires systematic treatment of risks that may arise from malfunctions of electrical and electronic safety-related systems, and the Automotive Cybersecurity Engineering Standard, ISO SAE 21434, fixes cybersecurity risk management as an engineering requirement across the entire vehicle life cycle. The implication is simple. A HWCI-centered approach can build stable manufacturing and quality gates, and a CSCI-centered approach can build rapid functional improvement and data-driven optimization. But in ADAS, those two worlds must be bound by a single rule: validated change. When a sensor changes, software verification must be automatically traceable. When software is updated, safety and security analyses must be automatically refreshed. and when a component changes, that change must be traceable to system safety requirements. Such traceability and sealing is the core of vertical integration. The numbers implying market expansion also mean that the difficulty of integration expands. The more repeatedly forecasts suggest that the software-defined vehicle, SDV market, and the ADAS market can grow significantly over the mid to long term, the more the relative weight of HWCI decreases and the relative weight of CSCI increases. If a HWCI-centered company treats CSCI as a peripheral function, the product ages. Conversely, if one emphasizes only CSCI speed and sacrifices a HWCI-level quality culture, a single failure in a safety industry can destroy trust. Managerial integration exists only when KPIs and responsibility boundaries are unified. The moment integration is discussed as if it were only a technical matter, failure becomes certain. Integration is a management problem, and the essence of management is the unification of key performance indicators, KPIs, and responsibility boundaries. To achieve horizontal integration at the same level, redundant development and redundant customer response must be removed, common product lines and common processes must be built, and economies of scope must be realized. To achieve vertical integration across higher and lower levels, interface change management, defect responsibility, and recall response must be sealed into a single system. This is the point where large enterprise integration commonly fails. Budget and reporting lines are integrated quickly, but the final product responsibility line is integrated late, and late integrated responsibility is easily transferred to software personnel as responsibility without decision rights. At that moment, core software talent becomes exhausted internally first, and the exhausted organization loses externally first. If the post-Harman period had truly been successful, it would have institutionalized the unification of approval authority for over-the-air software updates, OTA, a single window for security vulnerability response, a unified defect classification system across HWCI, CSCI, and single ownership of functional safety work products. Without such institutions, Harman remains Samsung's automotive affiliate, and an integrated platform cannot be born. Cultural integration must block the structure, where HWCI culture pushes out CSCI culture. It is natural to view Harman as having a software-centered organizational language and Samsung Electronics as having a hardware-centered organizational language. Hardware language looks clear in numbers and responsibility attribution, cost, yield, process, defect rate, while software language contains experimentation, iteration, and uncertainty, and thus tends to be pushed back in large enterprise decision-making. This collision is not about who is right, but about which language holds decision rights. If the CSCI organization cannot secure legitimate decision rights within the product's safety and security documentation system, software personnel become increasingly marginalized, and M&A ends in the paradox of being integrated on the surface while weakening actual capability. The more financially stable Harman becomes, the more dangerous it can be, because when the status quo becomes sweet, painful vertical integration investment needed to climb into the brain layer tends to be postponed. This issue intensifies the moment ZF ADAS is attached. ADAS carries far stronger pressures of safety, legal risk, and recall liability than infotainment, so large enterprise approval procedures are likely to strengthen. If that strengthening directly implies bureaucratization of the software organization, core talent will exit rapidly. Policy, ethics, and regulatory integration determine the market threshold before technology. Does integration is also a policy problem and an ethical problem? ADAS combines data collection, updates, and automated decision-making, and when responsibility is dispersed among OEMs, parts makers, and software suppliers after an accident, the outcome ultimately becomes consumer harm. Integration must not be a technology that blurs responsibility, but a design that clarifies responsibility. Within the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE, Automotive Regulatory Framework, the trend of cybersecurity regulation, R155, and software update regulation, R156, becoming thresholds for sales approval, shows that the market is shaped not by technology but by responsibility systems. This is not a formal problem of regulatory compliance, but an ethical structural issue of the industry. Who takes responsibility to the end for updates and security incidents? The figure of roughly 1.19 million annual global road traffic deaths makes it explicit that the purpose of ADAS is not convenience but survival. In this market, failure is treated not as revenue loss but as a social disaster, and therefore integration must be designed as policy ethics responsibility integration before it is designed as technical integration. ZF ADAS acquisition looks like horizontal expansion, yet it explodes vertical integration difficulty. The transaction in which Harman acquires ZF's ADAS business can be summarized as an enterprise value of approximately $1.5 billion, a closing expected in the second half of 2026, and the movement of roughly 3,750 personnel. This figure does not mean entry into a new business, but a sharp rise in integration difficulty. Infotainment-centered horizontal integration is fundamentally about expanding product scope, but ADAS is fundamentally about completing vertical integration across HWCI, CSCI. More difficult than bundling sensors, computing and software is sealing that bundle into an evidence chain of functional safety and cybersecurity so that OEMs can adopt it responsibly. If the cultural and managerial conflicts that already existed within Harman are not resolved and ZF ADAS is added, integration risk grows not by addition but by multiplication. If software experts cannot obtain decision rights and become trapped in bureaucratic approval procedures, the phrase "we acquired the brain" remains, but the people who can operate the brain do not. The prescription is simple. A large enterprise must be king of integration, commercialization, and scaling, not an inventor. In a bureaucratized large enterprise, exploratory research and development, R&D, and service innovation have structurally high probabilities of failure. In an organization designed to eliminate failure, experimentation slows, and slow experimentation loses in the market. The true calling of a large enterprise is not invention, but commercialization, the ability to productize verified technologies quickly and scale them into global markets through worldwide channels, quality systems, and capital. Accordingly, for Samsung Electronics to succeed, first it must seal the HWCI-centered quality culture and the CSCI-centered operating culture under one rule: validated change. Second, in horizontal integration, it must enforce same-layer standardization to expand scope, while in vertical integration, it must unify ownership of the safety security evidence chain and the defect liability line. Third, it must grant the software organization real decision rights inside the safety documentation system to block talent leakage. Fourth, it must reduce fixation on internal invention and operate as an engine of integration, commercialization, and scaling by absorbing external innovation. The Harman acquisition may have produced certain results from the perspective of profit and loss, but unless the integration design that climbs into the vehicle brain layer is completed, that result remains only the result of a stable business unit. The ZF ADAS acquisition is an opportunity to fill that unfinished gap, but if the same collisions are repeated, it becomes the result of buying failure at a higher price. Samsung's contest is not M&A but integration, and integration is the capability to design technology, management, policy, and ethics at once. Chairman Lee Jae-yong's challenge is admirable, but it is necessary to distance executives who remain trapped in a hardware-centered manufacturing mindset, Thank you for watching Professor Namyong Lee's commentary. Long